All right, we are live. Awesome. Hey guys, welcome to Author Alchemist. I'm here today with Connard Hogan, who's an author of several books. And what I wanted to talk about was Connard's journey on how he wrote his books, what the journey has been like as an author, and then any struggles that he has had that we might be able to help you guys out there as well. So hi Connard, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and tell me about your two books. I noticed one. Well, did you grow up on a farm in Kentucky?
Yes. No.
Okay,
I grew up in Kentucky,
okay.
in Louisville,
Oh,
and both sets of grandparents lived on farms. My mother's parents lived on one farm. My father's parents moved around. And generally speaking, once or twice a month on the weekends in particular, and on holidays, we would go visit one or the other. Most of the time it was my mother's parents, and they lived about 60 miles south of Louisville.
that's amazing. And I actually lived in Ohio for a little bit. I know Kentucky area pretty well. So it's beautiful area, beautiful area. So tell me about your book. You've got several books out. You won an award as well. Tell me about that.
My goodness, where do I start? It's a big subject, and it took a long time. I started writing. I started becoming interested in becoming a published author about 1985-ish, when I was wanting to climb mountains, and I went to climb Mount Denali in Alaska in 1988, I believe it was. At that point, I'd been reading about other climbers who, and subsequently after that, about early 90s, who were writing books. I like to write. I like to read about adventurers and whatnot. And I'd grown up with listening to people like Lowell Thomas talk about some of the adventurers going to the South or North Pole and those kind of things. So I was wanting to begin to write about that, and I started journaling or taking my diary notes as I did those things, with the idea that I'd write it and get published at some point. So I began to write about late 80s in that sense, and attend conferences and attend some writing classes at adult education and so on. Learning that I didn't know as much as I thought I did about writing, and I need to brush up on skills and whatnot. So I was learning in the process of doing that, and I would take a chapter here or there to a critique group or a conference, talk to an editor or an agent, and they would say, well, you got to do this and change, and it was a long process and a lot of ups and downs about, oh, I'm really doing well now, and then, no, it doesn't. I don't like it, or it doesn't fit, or this and that and so on.
Did you find,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you find that a lot of, excuse me, different agents, or when everyone was giving you a different opinion, so you're like, oh, I got to change this, or I got to change this, and this person says this, and how did that?
Well, yes, and not that I was getting that many opinions, but the opinions I were getting were somewhat conflicting or different angles or whatnot at different times. Go this direction or go that direction. So it's not all consistent. It never, I don't know what I expected, but certainly now I understand. Don't expect it to be consistent, and it depends on the person you're working with. That's okay, though. You just need to be aware of that. So sometime around, I guess in one of my writing classes in adult ed, we get prompts to write about things, and one thing I wrote about was a short scene or story about an episode or a event with my grandmother, I think. And I can't remember what it was exactly. There's a number of them, but I think it was going down to the root cellar to get a jar of, I don't know, stewed tomatoes or something, and there being a snake down there. So I started writing. I wrote that, and I thought, well, maybe I can write another one. And as I started writing about one thing, I'd remember something else, think, well, I can write about that too. Over time, then I kind of started to develop that as a manuscript. So that's sitting aside the climbing manuscript, or working on that here and there. Then I'm working on the farm manuscript here and there. At some point, doing the same things, going to conferences, talking with people, critique groups, attending workshops, and all that. Continuing to work on my writing skills. I had another prompt to write. Idea popped up to write an event or a situation that occurred to me in Vietnam, because I'm a veteran,
Wow.
served in Vietnam. So I wrote
For
that.
serving us. I just want to like speak to that.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
That was during guard duty at
Mm.
a supply depot or building. And so then as I wrote that, well, I could write about another thing that I remember about Vietnam. And then so at some point that started to develop into a manuscript.
Mhm.
Um, so occasionally I'd work on one thing and get discouraged and set it aside. And that's a common piece
Yes.
of feedback that you get. Work on something if you get stuck, or let it stew a while and then you come back to it. So I had these three things going there for a little while. And this last manuscript about the Vietnam, that was early, no, not early 90s. It's more like late 90s, maybe early 2000s.
Mm.
And so I'd been kind of working on those, and I thought, well, okay, now it's about time to take it to the next step and get serious about finding an agent. So I'd
Mhm.
submit a short story here, or submit a one of the manuscripts here or there. Never really got that far. And then hearing the feedback from other people in workshops and conferences is like, it's difficult. You have a lot of rejections. That part was discouraging, and I'd kind of, my level of motivation would increase and decrease about, okay, I'll put out some feelers, I'll
Mhm.
submit queries or whatever. And then, of course, along came the big pandemic, COVID. Now, I had been working on, just prior to that, working on social media. I never liked the idea of doing a lot of social media. Anyway, I was kind of dabbling in it, had my foot in it, had my Facebook account and my LinkedIn account, and that's about
Mhm.
all. Just a little bit of this and that. The COVID came along, got locked down, and of course, as all of us do, I'm getting older, and I'm thinking to myself, I need to do something to move on.
Mhm.
I hate to be crude about it, but the old phrase as I grew up was "shit or get off the pot."
No, you're fine. My dad would say the same thing, so you're good here.
Yeah. So anyway,
True.
there's not a better phrase than that, really, if you can get past the
There
language.
really isn't. Yeah.
No. So, um, so I found someone who was interested in helping me. She said, "I can help you work on your social media." Rachel Sarah Thurston, local person. And so during the lockdown, I started working with her, consulting with her, and thank goodness for Zoom.
Mhm.
I beefed up my presence on social media with my Facebook and my
Mhm.
LinkedIn, and then decided I need to do something about getting published.
Yeah.
I didn't. I was hesitant about putting out a lot of feelers again regarding agents,
Yeah.
though I'd occasionally do something here and there, kind of tinker with it. I decided I would look into hybrid publishing
Mhm.
from the angle of self-publishing,
Okay.
bypass the whole, cut out the middleman part,
Mhm.
the agent and the traditional publisher, and found a publishing company, Authority Publishing, and I've been retired for a while and had the physical and the financial means to work with them to get my um, farm manuscript, Once Upon a Kentucky Farm, published.
Beautiful.
Now that was in um, March of last year, 2022.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then I had to get into the marketing aspect. So I work with
Yeah.
Rachel and trying to work on marketing, but I'm not a marketer. I don't like to be a seller.
Hmm.
It's just not in my nature to do those kinds of things. And so I worked on worked on marketing for a few months, and then
Hmm.
kind of dropped back and said, okay, now but I'm still interested in publishing, and I wanted to do something about my Vietnam manuscript. Um, so I worked with Rachel and Authority Publishing to publish my second book, The Vietnam Barbara Brothels and Bombs in the Night, um, and got that published in this year, June of this year.
Congrats.
Um, Now, currently, I'm backtracking and working on my climbing manuscript.
Ooh, nice.
So if I've expressed that in the correct order, I basically started with the climbing manuscript, then I think it was the Vietnam, then the farm, but I've published them in reverse order of that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of have an engineering mindset. So in a sense, I'm reverse engineering, and I always do that. I never work from an outline per se, not for the bigger thing. I'd think about it, I'd hear about it, and I tried to do that, but it's like it didn't quite work for me. I just have to write from usually sequentially
Yep.
of what I recall. And that fits right in with I'm doing memoir, and I don't have to think about, oh, what's the character going to do, blah blah blah. That's already there. I know all that. It's just a matter of pulling it up, um, and then I can move the sequences around as I want later on
Yep.
to make the story more interesting or to help it be more powerful. Anyway, currently working on my climbing manuscript and hope to get that.
Wonderful.
Maybe I'll get that published one day too.
I love it. Thank you.
Okay, so
For
that's a lot said, and there's a whole lot to unpack if you want to.
No, thank you for sharing all of that. I appreciate that.
No,
And
yeah.
navigating the publishing world is so complicated. People think that, oh, I'll just, like, as they say, query a bunch of agents and one will answer. And honestly, there's a whole process for it. I mean, think about it, because these agents are getting thousands of submissions every single day. And so
Mm-hmm.
how can you be that one that shines from those emails that are coming in? And I will say the agents aren't getting them, by the way. It's the assistants. It's somebody else that's running that email or that, submission line.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know because I used to be on the other end.
Uh-huh.
So, and so when I would get submissions that would come in, if it's just, sure, cover letters are everything, absolutely. And they are read eventually, but it's like, we have all this work to do. And then I got to answer a few here. Then I'm going to do all this work that I'm really doing. Then I'm going to answer a few here. And what really sets that apart is having a book proposal template. And so that's what I kind of preach on, is not just like a book proposal that is, because you want it to answer everything in it. They've got thousands of submissions to go through. And if you're just sending a manuscript or some samples in, that's going to be like everyone else. Like, yours isn't popping, yours isn't standing out. But if you actually have a book proposal that you're sending, that's two snippets of the manuscript you're working on, that has to do with your platform, your bio, your why this book stands out, why it's so important to you. What message are you delivering and helping others, by reading it? What is that? What are they
Mm-hmm.
going to get from that? What's the emotions that the audience is going to feel? All of those things right away. It's like in your pitch. That way, if the busy assistant, that's probably 20 years old, their first job, they're skimming through. Their job is to like go through as fast as they can to get through these, right? And then plus all their work they have to do. So rather than just being tossed to the side, which so many are, having it really pop, having it in color is one. Not having just like, oh, I'm sending a Word doc that's in with this. No, that's not going to work. I mean, how many people send those black and white Word docs? Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody. But if there's one that comes through that's a colorful one, I don't even care what colors, it doesn't matter. It's just colorful, and right away it looks really put together, and it shows me your platform. And what a platform is your website, your social media, some screenshots of your social, the marketing you've been working on right now, and then what you plan to do once the book is published. Having a whole plan like that, having your reach, what reach is your audience list. So like you would add up your Twitter, you would add up your, all your followers and all your different accounts. When you add all those up, let's say there's, 500 here and 500 here and 500 here, that's 1,500. And maybe your email list is 1,000, that's 2,500. Awesome. But then there's more than that. Let's say you've got, Rachel, for example, she's got a group of friends. If she were to send an email out for you, maybe that's another 3,000. So then or I'm going to say 5 so I can add it up. So that's, then that's 3,000. And then maybe you find some other people that have some reach also, and you put them in the proposal of these people will send an email out or a blast or whatever. And you add it all up because all they care about, are you going to sell books for them? That's all they care about.
Mm-hmm.
So if it shows on there, oh, you've got a reach of, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 or whatever it may be, or more, the more the merrier, then they're like, oh, wow. And then it's so well put together. It's bright. It catches their eye. They're like, this is someone I want to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what my biggest recommendation is for sending agent queries out and pitching publishers, traditional as well. Being that you've got 2 books out, they're going to ask, one of the first questions they're going to ask, whether it's an agent or a publisher, they're going to say, how many books did you sell? What is, that really, that's all they care about. So if you're like, oh, I sold, 500 books or I sold 1,000 books, tell them about also how you like to go and do tours. You'll actually go in person. I noticed that you have some on your website. Talk about that. Put that in your proposal. Show I've spoken at these places and this is what I talk about. Show photos from that. That also catches their eye. So what they're going to ask is that you've had 2 other books. They're going to know, I've sold this many books and here's a whole plan. And here's another one that I wrote, about climbing in this, and it's cool. Then not only having your comparative titles and analysis, which is a huge part of it, obviously, and you want to pick 10 titles that are in the last 5 years that are similar, and nothing's going to be your book, but something similar that has sold really well. And it doesn't have to be about climbing. It could be about just accomplishing this huge goal that someone set their mind to that's like so hard to do, and they made it there and they did it, right? Putting your mindset, it's really mindset, So that's one of I would put that on there. And your genre for that, yes, it's a memoir or it's like your story, but it's got a theme of mindset, right? So what other themes are in that book that you would have as well? Finding those themes in it, writing that all down right here in that proposal as well, because it's going to get their mind thinking. Because also what's selling right now, what's trending with publishers and agents, self-help books, mindset books, psychology, trauma, those books are trending. How to heal from trauma, how to get past, and you've got 2 books that talk about that as well. So I think I would right now, absolutely, it's time for you to get an agent. It's time. I think you can absolutely do it, and then just create that book proposal, show your 2 books in it and show a whole plan, and you'd be good to go, honestly. Now, given I'll say with traditional publishers, for first-time authors, it's like 5 to 10,000 usually upfront is what you get. You're not a first-time author. You've written 2 other books. However, what they still look at it as, if these books didn't do well, like if they didn't sell well, then they're going to say, it's still considered first-time author, just so you know. So just to speak to that. And yes, it could be a marketing plan, right? But they're going to want to know, the traditional publishers, they've got a marketing team, they've got a PR team, but they still want to know that you're going to market and that you have a whole marketing plan with it as well. And so if the track record isn't so good on these 2, you need to explain why and be prepared to explain why, because that's going to be a question they're going to ask in your meeting. And I would address it. I would honestly address it almost in the email, speak to it, the mouse in the room. You want to speak to that mouse because they're going to think that anyway. Oh, wow, this is like a really good, pitch, but why didn't these 2 sell? Or so it's like just having an answer for that. And being creative with it, thinking outside the box. You could even be like, well, it was COVID or whatever it may be, and I didn't have the team then, but I'm ready for the team now, whatever it may be, talk about it. Maybe you were working so much then, and now there's freedom and free time to whatever it may be, put that in there. And that's like my advice to you. There's so many things I could say right now, but I feel like, and 2, you have a website. I like your website. It's great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And having a presence everywhere, like you're saying, like LinkedIn, like it's funny because I have a lot of authors that usually come to me and they say, I'm not on social. I don't want to be on social. And I hear that a lot,
Uh,
but it's a catch 22, right?
yes,
Yeah. So I
they're
mean, guess
different.
what? You don't
Yeah,
have to be on social, but you have to have a girl or a guy or someone doing social
somebody
for you.
to do
Yeah,
something on.
exactly. You've got to have that presence. It's
Right.
absolutely
It's well,
huge.
in a bigger sense, and this is somewhat pessimistic or nihilistic, maybe. We're all competing against each other, people. If you got something snappy or shiny, a shiny penny that you can show people and
Mhm.
gets their attention, that may be all you need to do. But there's lots of little shiny pennies out there, or possibilities, and so everybody is looking for that little possibility of a shiny penny where they can get attention. And it doesn't take a lot. Not everybody can be a bestseller, though.
No, it
That's the
doesn't.
discouraging part. The uplifting part is some of us do, or
Mhm.
us, some of them. I'm not all that successful, or I don't consider myself successful from that standpoint. But I suppose we also have to ask ourselves what is important for us. Is that
Right.
one of our goals? Do we need to do that, or are we really passionate about doing that?
Mhm.
I hear that thought that comes to my mind is motivational comments and whatnot. Follow your passion. That's
Yeah.
great. Sometimes we can't always do that. Um, uh, some of the motivational comments kind of boil things down into a simplistic manner that make them almost unrealistic. We don't always succeed if we try, but we won't succeed probably if we don't try.
Oh, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
reality is not cut and dry. It's not black and white.
But you know what I
And
wanna say? You did try. It took
yeah,
and I've heard it you did try and you did it. So
yeah,
take a moment and congratulate yourself for how far you've come. That's amazing. You wrote not only 1 book, you wrote 2 books and a 3rd one coming. That's huge.
I
How
know.
many
I
people
know.
out there, have said, "I wanna write a book, I wanna write a book," and haven't even tried to do it or maybe sat for a little bit and wrote something and then didn't even go through all the way that you did. You
Uh-huh.
did. So you do have that mindset. And it does take a certain type of person to follow through and actually get it done. So kudos to you for doing that because it's huge. It really
Yeah,
is.
thank you. And it
Yeah.
is hard. It is hard. And some of your listeners may relate to this. It is hard to congratulate myself and really
Mm.
appreciate the achievement. It's like now that I'm on the other side of having 2 books published, not just one, and a few other things, accomplishments in writing, it's almost as if my goalposts changed,
Mhm.
moved.
Okay. Yep.
And so it's hard to really stay back in that mindset of where I was originally to say, boy, look how much I've done. It's like, now I've done this, look how much more I need to do. And that's a drawback as well. You got to really be careful about not adding more pressure on yourself, or being
Yeah.
discouraged. Like I've gotten halfway up the mountain, but look how much more I got to go. So maybe
Yeah.
I'll quit. You know,
Again,
um,
mindset,
yeah, that's a
And
tough one. That's a
yeah,
tough one.
it is. But you know what? You've done it in the past. Look at what you've accomplished in your life. You've accomplished a lot in your life, you know? Being in Vietnam, come on, that's a lot. That's a lot. And that's a mindset in its own. Not to
Hmm.
mention growing up possibly with trauma, right? That's a whole nother
Oh
thing.
yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yep. That's a whole nother thing. And that actually gives you that drive, right? Just for survival. And so
Mm.
look at the kind of themes. And then going into climbing a mountain, that's a whole nother thing. It's the mindset of putting your mind to it, survival, right? All 3 of those have the theme of survival in
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
And it's empowering to look where you are now, safe in a home, that's over your head and you're able to write about it, and looking back to where you were where it wasn't safe in either 3 of those, obviously the mountain you chose, but those other 3, other times you didn't choose. You didn't choose to grow up in trauma. You didn't choose, well, Vietnam maybe, but like you didn't choose to be in some of those situations you were put in. You had to. So it still is a theme of survival, which you got through, and you were not
Hmm.
safe in those situations when you were younger, and here you are now, safe and writing about it. But just like, again, congratulating yourself for getting through it, because that is a huge mindset. That's huge. And honestly, you could be talking about mindset. I kind of see a book that might come along that you could literally write and speak and help others through mindset, because you've done it in several different ways, you know?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I just want to put that out there, and I'm
Okay.
curious I'm all into astrology and numerology. So I'm curious what your astrology or your numerology is, because fours, I will say, if you're a fours set goals, and then they reach their goals, and then they're like, oh yeah, but then I have all these goals.
Oh yeah.
And then they reach those goals and they're like, wait a second, but now I have all
But
these.
now you have more.
Yep. So
The
I'm curious.
goalpost changes. Yeah, it's like the
Yes.
expectations change, morph over time, which
And
I guess can happen to all of us. But we just have to be aware of that and not uh, allow that thinking to discourage us.
absolutely.
Um, but
Absolutely.
yeah, and for me, well, changing the subject slightly, but for
Mhm.
me, writing these two memoirs and writing these two memoirs,
Yep.
which are about trauma, is another way. We haven't mentioned it, but I was a professional licensed marriage and family therapist for 25
Oh,
years,
see, there you
and
go. Okay.
I'm retired now, or
Okay.
have been for a while. That the writing of the trauma for me as a memoir was another expression of the way I could, another way I could express myself. Let's
Yes.
say, as opposed to sitting in a therapy session, one as a patient and two as a therapist. Both can help process those kinds of experiences. That the writing of it, putting it out there, is therapeutic in itself, and then sharing it with other people. The idea of the writing it generally to share it, but you don't have to share something you
Sure.
write, of course.
Sure.
So it's an extension of that process for me, of the healing journey. And
Mhm.
it kind of fits in my mind with the 12 steps of recovery, which could be applied to anything, but
Right.
they
Yep.
started as application for helping alcoholics,
Mhm.
and then uh, expanded to helping people with drug issues and drug addictions. Um, that the process is taking stuff that we've kept inside as secrets or whatever, and beginning to share that first with a higher power, then another human, and then later on helping other people with their struggles so that we help ourselves too, which
Mhm.
then morphs into spirituality. So it's all that analogous to a 12-step journey for me in writing and getting these published.
Mhm.
So I'm not a professional. Well, you could have gathered that. I'm not a professional writer. I haven't done it all my life. I don't write for the sake of earning money, um, which wasn't my initial motivation. And of course, I always had in the back of my mind, maybe I'll get rich, or maybe one of them will
Mhm.
become a movie, which could still happen. But
Right.
I got to be careful about changing the goalposts, moving the goalposts here. I wrote them in order to write them, to get help solidify some of those memories, because otherwise they can kind of run around in your head and
Yeah.
be vague like a fog. Um, to help clarify those for myself. And then the next step was, well, maybe they could be helpful for other people to read.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's kind of, again, analogous for my 12-step journey with that, from my trauma, the trauma that I've experienced, and
Mhm.
easier to write from a memoir from that standpoint. I've always had the bent to kind of lean toward being honest, and sometimes that's got me in trouble. But um, I think that, the phrase I think of is, "You're only as sick as your secrets." So
True.
I've tried not to keep too many secrets. I have a few, but I try not to keep too many.
Truth, very true. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that too. And you know what? Yeah, I honestly, with your background in psychology, now knowing that, because I did not know that, there you go. Mindset. You know the
Hmm.
mind. You've literally, that was your job, is knowing and helping others, with therapy. That is the mind. So, and then all the things that you've been through. So I really honestly, I could see you speaking and having a whole platform on mindset, and just think
Mhm.
about it. Like, it doesn't mean like, oh, tomorrow you're going to do it, but think about it, because I could see you developing into that. And you've already been a therapist, which is like a coach in a sense. So why
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
move into, if you choose to, but move into maybe coaching for mindset and looking into that, because you've done it. You've done it your own self in those 3 stories that you've shared with us. I know there's more stories. I'm sure there are. Not to mention, being in that field anyway. I mean, you're a professional, and being able to switch over to mindset coaching and helping others, get through their big fears in life of whatever it may be, or their big hurdles they need to get over. You're a great person to speak to for that. So just a thought. And if you were to
Okay. Thank.
put that platform out there, that's going to help you sell the books. Those other books those 2 books that you have on the shelf back there, plus the other one, it's just going to help push them forward. It's just another marketing
Mhm.
tool, but it's also a way for, I feel like, really speaking your truth and really helping others, get through it. You're a helper as well,
Well,
so.
yeah, yeah. I'm a empath and a helper.
Mhm.
Kind of grew. I was trained to do that growing up with
Yeah.
my father, who drank, and my mother, who argued, and I was afraid he was going to kill her. So it was like I was really set on trying to figure out the
Mhm.
problem and solve the problem.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I had OJT for that from very early on.
Mhm.
And there is, that's another piece of the writing process, though I wouldn't have said early on that that was my motivation to do it.
Yeah.
One thing about motivation recently that has occurred to me is, if you ask me about a motivation,
Mhm.
um, now I'm not saying I'm flighty or whatnot. I tend to be more scientific and rational based. I think that if you ask me what my motivation is today, I'll answer it one way. And if you ask me tomorrow, I'll answer it a different way, perhaps, and next month a different way.
Mhm.
Motivation is not a simple cut and dry matter. It changes. And
Mhm.
there may be different levels, like peeling an onion, of
Totally.
motivation at any given moment, because that's, as humans, we're complex.
Yes.
And we may have more things operating on us and influencing us than we're conscious of, which I think we are, or generally are. We may be conscious of some things, but they may not be the primary motivators for us. They may be secondary, or in that sense. But regardless, motivation is a complex mix of things. And so, um,
You've got this.
becoming the cheerleader, or being the cheerleader,
Mhm.
whatever word you want to use there, a therapist, a guru, yeah,
Coach,
a
right.
leader, whatever.
Mhm.
That was all part of the motivation there, but I wouldn't have said it that way earlier on.
Mhm.
I think all of us have that potential
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
those things, because we want to connect.
Yes.
One of the things, well, stop me if you don't want to head in this direction. But regarding spirituality, my take on it, um, I
Go
can
for it.
say this in about 5 minutes. Um, let's see. I think it
It's
was,
safe here. I am all the way woo woo as you can get. So
yeah.
you're safe
Yeah,
here.
I can't think. Is a Greek philosopher, who was it that said man is a social animal? I want to say Plato, but I may be wrong. Man is a social animal. We don't grow up in a vacuum. We're not raised by wolves, although that was the myth in Rome, Romulus and Remus.
Mhm.
But we have human contact from the beginning of our life, when we're born, all the way through our life. Now, some of us tend to be isolated or want to be later on for whatever reason, but we need to have that contact. Now, I think spirituality is about having that contact in the bigger context beyond humans. So for me, spirituality being connected to the universe.
Yes.
That is the questions that, or within that are the questions. Why are we here? What is our purpose? Um, what happens when we die? I think all of those are that same force and impulse or need that we have to be connected, not only to people from the Plato's level, but the spiritual level,
Mhm.
connected to the universe. And so, writing is part of that. Wanting to write, wanting to share, wanting to connect, wanting to be a leader, wanting to be a guru, a helper, all of that. That's all part of that same process of connecting, that we have that need to be in communication, interaction with people, and then beyond that, the universe in general. Anyway, so my big spiel on
I think it's
spirituality.
great. And I feel, again, this is all why you would be a fantastic coach, because you would tie all of this in to your people that you work with that are attracted to you. So I want to speak to that again. And I do want to kind of reel back to a little bit about marketing, because I know that you had mentioned about your marketing thing. Sorry, I'm switching subjects.
No, that's all right.
I love when we could dive down this road, and I love it. And but I want to go back to the marketing point. Just to give some advice with that too, as you're writing your next book. It takes about 6 months before, like, if let's say your book is projected to come out, what is it, October? So we've got 2 months, so like April. Let's say your book comes out in April. Right now is when you would start your marketing, and you want to have 6 months before the book comes out for the release, and have a solid plan with that. In fact, I've got something I can always send you. It's on my website, but I'll send it to you, that kind of breaks down the what you guys should be doing, to get until your launch date. Because if you do it last minute, it's not your sales last minute are not gonna help. It's like, we don't have the book and we release the book and then you do marketing. No, it's like 6 months before. And you can start pre-sales too, and depending on your publisher, but you should be able to start pre-sales technically 6 months before the book comes out. And then you can offer some cool stuff with it, so now that you've got your 2 other books, with this other book, when it comes out, let's say, you put, oh, I have this book and I'm offering a deal on the whole package for all the books, or something along those lines that gets them to tie into it. So just being creative with that marketing plan as well. And then thinking about that as you put that into the book proposal that you're going to pitch to agents, because it's time. So I'm just going to say to that. And obviously if you're happy with, the publisher you have now, then great, do it that way. Just have a solid marketing plan. I mean, that's going to be the key in order to make the other 2, because the other 2 books they can still sell, and they'll still sell more. As if this new book has a solid marketing plan coming out, because this is the one you want to focus on, these other 2, those will sell as this plan comes out, as this, you start getting on tons more podcasts. And my advice to you too is, every podcast that you go on, every show that you go on, any interview that you have a call to action. And what is that, for those that don't know what that means, or if you're literally thinking about, at the end or at some point, plugging your website somewhere, like, yes, so you can find my 2 books here, and then say it in the beginning, say it in the middle of the interview, and say it at the end. And I say this because you don't know when listeners are going to come in and listen, or how long they're going to listen for on someone's podcast. So just make sure it's plugged. Yeah. And I would say, like, and your call to action is going to change, so like, if you have out, it's going to be, go to Amazon and buy it here, because you want all those links, so you can get the reviews and the links, and, bestseller. And yeah, so anyway, I just want to speak to that, knowing what you're,
that was a great prompt. Thank you. You can go to my website. There's my name right there. Just Google my name. Whoops. Right there. That's where I see it anyway.
It's right there.
And you can get to my website, and you can find links to my Amazon book pages for both my books and some of my other writing and my blog. And you can send me an email. You can sign up for a quarterly newsletter. I get blown away when I go look at my website as to how complex it is now. But I have worked on it for a couple of years, and every time I add a new link or another page to something, it's like it just grows and grows. So if you keep, I guess my advice to people, I'm not talking to you as a 3rd grader, but but I would say it just to reiterate it. Just start anywhere, take a step, and then you take another step. Before you know it, you can look back and say, yeah, I have achieved a lot. Now, like I said earlier, I have a hard time congratulating myself for that and appreciating it. However, at times I can appreciate it a little bit.
Sometimes you just need that reminder, and I feel like having your 2 books right there behind you, take a moment every day for gratitude this is going back into spirituality, because you got to have gratitude for where
Mhm.
your journey came from and where you are today. Again, you're safe today. Those times back then, they were not, so taking a moment, looking at those 2 books in the back that are your journeys of not being safe, and saying,
Exactly.
thank you. And actually, let's show them. Let's put them on the,
I
yeah.
can hold them here.
I think a little
Wait, wait a
more
minute.
closer.
Rub your belly and pat your head at the same time. I
There
dare
you
you.
go.
It's not easy to do.
It's not.
Whoops.
But those
There
are
you go.
great. And I'll make sure I put these also. I'll have your link on the bottom in the description as well. But yeah, but for you, that's my advice to you, is to take a moment almost every single day, turn around, look at those books and say, and even like hand over your heart and be, I did it. I'm here. I wrote about it. That's fucking cool.
Hmm.
So,
I think of the character on Saturday Night Live, and people like me, doggone it.
and people like me. Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Exactly.
Thank you, by the
Well,
way, so much, Connard, for
well, you're welcome.
coming on today.
We
And
did
yeah,
it.
we did it. We
We
did
finally met and talked. All right.
it. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna end the stream real quick.